Welcome to the Point of No Return podcast, a show at the intersection of technology and strategy. On this show, we interview industry leaders and experts to better understand how they think about strategy during this time of exponential progress.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Point of No Return podcast. Today is a very special episode for me. It's episode 100. I didn't really think I was going to do 100 episodes when I started this show. It was really an exploration of conversations that we had been having, right? The type of work that we do really is kind of lies at this intersection of technology, business, and investment. And we're having really good conversations with leaders in those categories. And we figured, well, why don't we just, record some of them, put them out in the world and share? And it's kind of taken off on a life of its own. So I'd like to thank everyone for that's been listening since the early days, and obviously new listeners as well. It's been a lot of fun, and I intend to continue to do this for a while, as long as people are willing to sit down and talk to me. And one of the things that I think makes this show special for me, obviously, is the people guests. And today I have a special guest, which is Jeffery. He's been on the show before. I think it was episode 2, so I was really happy to have him again. A lot has changed in the time since that first interview. And we did speak again about the early days of his career, where how he left Montreal to go to San Francisco, launch of super ambitious photo sharing app years before Instagram launched, and kind of the peaks and valleys that he experienced while doing it. We talked about his return to Montreal, and then we talked a lot about BreatheLife, which is the new company he co-founded and that he's the CEO of. And kind of full disclosure, I'm an investor in the company, so I'm obviously biased here, but they are doing quite a bit of incredible work in my estimation, and really demystifies insurance as a category for me, and was one of the key reasons I decided to invest. And he even obviously is an incredible entrepreneur, has been leading the company now to new heights, and so we dug into that quite a bit, and I really think that today's content hopefully helps mark this special episode for me, and I really appreciate everyone's time. Thank you. Ian, happy to see you, man.
Happy to see you too.
I've been trying to get you back on the show for a while, so I'm happy that you took the time. Really appreciate it. And one place I know it's your second time around, so I think you're the second time guest. So
okay, was I the first ever as well? I think?
You were the second. Yeah. First was David No, as well. Yeah, so yeah. But yeah, I'm happy. I think this is the 100th episode, so I'm happy that you took the time. So yeah,
you've done a lot.
Yeah, it's been fun, and so I'm really excited to go in. A lot's changed since we first spoke.
Yeah.
But for the people that don't know, you still want to talk about the early days again. I want to go back to some of the points. And maybe more of a broad question to start. I don't think I've ever asked you, is did you always want to, start companies and build? Was this something that, from a young age that you were passionate about, or did it just develop over time?
It's actually a funny story, which I've been using a lot lately because it gets a few chuckles. But I grew up in a family where my father was like a senior executive at an insurance company, and I saw him go to work every day with a suit and tie, and I was like, man, I never want to be that, right? And he used to tell me all the time, don't ever start a business. It's too hard. It's too much work, blah, blah, blah. And at 12 years old, I started my first business.
So, like a way to rebel against your dad.
Yeah. No, I started, very small business, but I was doing landscaping at 12 because I wanted this amazing stereo system, which my parents didn't want to buy me. And I said, well, I'm going to go make the money to buy it. And that's what I did that summer. And I kept that for many, many years. But yeah, I think for me, throughout my career, I've started a lot of businesses, and some of those were exited into big companies. And every time I'm in a big environment like that, I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel good in those environments. I want to build. Yeah. So it's been inside me since I was very, very young.
Yeah. And I want to go back to one particular larger corporate environment. I think it touches an inflection point in your career where you're working for a large agency. I think you're working for Cossette.
Yep.
And then from there, you moved to San Francisco. So walk us through that thought process. Yeah. Why leave this kind of safe job, right? Cossette's a really well-known communications ad firm that everyone respects. So curious as to what happened.
Especially back then when I joined, it was the biggest in the country by far. But even within that company, just so everyone understands, I was partnered with a buddy, and we were doing a small unit that was doing our own thing and sort of really trying to reinvent the way marketing was happening back in the day. And remember that this is pre-social media, right? And so the main way to broadcast to audiences was still TV. Yet we had these clients like Nike and Coca-Cola and Molson, Nokia, like these big brands who were trying to find new ways to meet or to reach the target audience. Typically they're the younger audiences who were not listening to TV anymore. And so we had this unit and we were going on the ground and doing word of mouth campaigns and all kinds of stuff like that. And I was I was paying a lot of attention to how do we change communication to this audience. And then one day I heard about this thing called Facebook that was in the US. It was very, very early days, right, when it was still just on US campuses. And I started digging into this. I'm like, oh shit, like this there's something here, right? And then YouTube and I'm like, man, this thing is going to really radically change the way we do marketing and communications. And one day I was invited to speak in front of the entire agency in Montreal. There was about 500 people. I was very, very young, right? I was in my early 20s. And I did a talk to all this company. I said, this is going to define how we do marketing later, right? TV is dead. We know that. And this is going to be the way it's going to happen. And I don't know exactly I didn't know exactly how, but I knew this was going to be really, really big. And in parallel to that, a friend of mine was in San Francisco, and he was looking to launch a business, and he knew my sort of approach to marketing and sort of the street marketing, the word of mouth, all that kind of stuff. And he calls me up one day. He says, Ian, I have this business idea. I want to launch a mobile app to allow people to share pictures in real time. And he says, I want you to be my CMO. I want you to lead the marketing side of this. And so we had that conversation for a while. And eventually I just picked up my stuff and I moved over to California. And essentially, what we launched was a product called Radar. And Radar was the very first mobile app for picture sharing.
And what year is this?
This is 2006.
This is pre-iPhone, right?
Yeah, 2006. It's not only pre-iPhone, it's pre-cloud hosting. It's pre-1 megapixel cameras, right? Yeah. So people were taking shitty pictures with a VGA camera and sharing this in real time with their network and having conversations around that. And we went around the world literally saying that one day everyone would be doing this, and people thought we were just crazy, right? They're like, this is never going to happen. Why would we do this? And blah, blah, blah. But we were exactly right? And then obviously technology advanced. So 1 megapixel cameras came and we had 3.5 megapixel cameras on our phone, and we were like, that was the big device, right? But like part of it's crazy. Like one of our marketing schwags was actually a mini flashlight to put on your keychain, right? Because the cameras didn't have a flashlight. So the four of us or the team would be like, okay, we're going to put a light here and a light here. One guy would be taking the picture to make sure there was a great picture because we were in a bar and you can't take a picture in a bar if there's no flash. So just very different sort of time frame. And so we built that from 2006 to 2010. We raised some really smart money. We raised from Jeffrey, the famous Crossing the Chasm book. So he did our A round.
That's incredible. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And our second round was led by Tim Draper, who coined the term viral marketing and was the brainchild behind Hotmail. They did our B round. So some really, really smart money. And I'm telling you, as a native Montrealer being in Silicon Valley, just figuring out now what a VC is and pitching to these guys, I was like, whew, like crazy. So we raised 13 million. And then 2008 happened. So we were out raising our C round with, believe it or not, we had burned 13 million and we were raising our C round with $5,000 in revenue.
Wow.
Different time, right? It was all about building the big network and trying to monetize it later. So 2008 happens. We're like scrambling. We're like, shit, no, all the VCs are hiding. And we said, we need to find a way to make some money out of this or else it's just going to shut down. And so the hardest thing in my career ever, we were 45 people at that point, and very, very close. And we let go half the team. And we pivoted, complete pivot. Like we took all the technology that we built around picture sharing, all the API access. At the time, like you had to have private API keys often, which like with Flickr and Facebook and all these things. And we took that and we built something new. We started building something new. And we sold the company on that vision. And so we sold it to Shutterfly, big public company. At the time, I had like $300 million in revenue or something like that, and made a bit of money, but obviously it was not at all what we were expecting, and it's certainly not the Instagram exit. And then we joined Shutterfly, and I was there for a year.
Yeah. It sounds like, you guys had the perfect idea just 5 years too early, right? I think Instagram launched in 11, if I'm not mistaken, 2011, or around that time, late.
It was before we exited, so I think it was more like 2009.
Okay.
The very early days.
Yeah. And when you made that pivot, how far along were you before the exit? Like, had you actually got any traction?
Yeah.
So what was the pivot exactly?
So the pivot was, we had this great technology to capture photos, and we had access to your photos no matter where they were, right? Because of the APIs that we had. And so we built this thing. Yeah, when you go to the mall and there's a photo booth, and you can do like the picture strips. So we said, what if we could, the concept was you're at a dinner, let's say, with your friends, and you're taking pictures, and some of them you're sharing in real time, but perhaps you want to make a memento. You want to give a gift to the host, right? And so you launched it. It was called Wink. Launch Wink. Choose a template of the strip, and you choose pictures to go in each of those strips. You can edit them, put some comments and stuff like that, and send them. So I'm sending it to you digitally. Say, hey, Nektar, thanks for the dinner. Enter your address here, and you'll get it in the mail the next day. So, and the next day it would be shipped to your door in a really amazing packaging. It cost $2, and you had like a memento of that night. So people were buying these and like putting them on their fridge and stuff like that. But that was the idea.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And when we sold it on that, we had zero traction. Didn't work yet. Right. But Radar, we had 1.5 million users. So we had a real user base. We have all kinds of crazy stories around that, but at the time, where there was no mobile distribution, it was very, very difficult. I hacked AdMob like crazy. You know AdMob well, right? So AdMob, which was the first mobile advertising platform around, when that thing launched, we tried it and like, oh shit, something's happening. This is giving us traffic. And I got so good at using it. Omar used to bring me in. Omar was the CEO. He used to bring me into sales conferences. I had their entire sales team in front of me, and I would show them my spreadsheet, and I would show them my daily routine of how I was using their network, because I was putting money down with my credit card, like multiple times a day. And then we had built our own tracking tool, because like things like Mixpanel didn't exist, to be able to track it, see what was converting. Like I taught them a lot about how to sell what they were building because of the way we were using it internally. But that was our main growth engine was AdMob. So we surfed AdMob's success for a long time. That's what got it to 1.5 million users.
Yeah, it's a great story because it's one of those you have to be lucky to be good and good to be lucky as well, right?
Yeah.
So you had the foresight to piggyback on platforms that were emerging.
Yeah,
right.
Because before AdMob, the only way to get distribution on mobile was through a big carrier deal with T-Mobile or any of the AT&T or the big carriers, right? And that was like a 1.5 year sales cycle. It was really brutal. So when AdMob came around, we're like, oh, what's this? And that worked.
Yeah. What led you to want to leave the Valley to come back to Montreal?
So I was in the Valley with my wife, who's from Montreal as well. I was at Shutterfly for about a year, and as you know, I've been through 2 acquisitions. Both were really brutal in the first year, very, very difficult. Sort of the change from startup culture to even, Shutterfly used to think of themselves as a startup, but a public startup. Very, very difficult transition. John, who was the CEO of Radar, and I, who were obviously, best friends at the time and still very, very close today. I was just in London with him a few months ago, but at the time, like it was a lot of tension between the two of us because he wanted to do it one way, I want to do it the other way. It was painful to get anything done inside of Shutterfly. And we had, my wife and I, our first child. And so we found ourselves being far from the family. I was really miserable at work. At this point, it's work, right? It's not my business anymore.
Yeah, it's not a passion anymore. It's, you're working for the man.
Exactly. And I was just telling Emma, my wife, I'm like, it's hard with the kid. It's hard at work. Like, I want to go back. Like, I was done. And when we moved to the Valley, I was there a year alone before she came in. And I made her, and we were both very career focused, career driven. And I made her a promise. I said, when we come back to Montreal, I want it to be about you, right? It won't be about what I want to do. It's going to be about what you want to do. And then out of the blue, TELUS contacts her and says, we have this job. We want you to do it. She had been there before. And I told Emma, I'm like, this is like, it's the fucking great job. It's perfect for you, right? And I said, it's a sign. We got to go. And she wasn't ready. So we came back. Combination of me being miserable, being far from the family with her first child, and a sort of perfect job for Emma. And so we came back.
Yeah.
That was 2010.
2010. I'm gonna skip ahead because last time we spoke quite a bit about Founder Fuel. We spoke about Password Box, so I don't want to go revisit. But when I touch back on what you're saying about sometimes you make moves for your life and then it ends up working out, right? So it's like, things did work out, even though I'm going to skip a few years ahead, the success you had at Founder Fuel, and then obviously with Password Box and subsequently Intel and TrueKey, I think is pretty good. So I'll invite people to check out that first episode, but I want to talk about you wanting to go back to startups, right? After having worked for big megacorp Intel, similar situation as we spoke. You're like, okay, well, I'm okay, when it's a startup environment where things are moving quickly, but once things kind of there's, the exit happens, you work at a big company, you kind of start jonesing a bit and want to get back into it. What led you to, okay, you know what, I'm ready to go back on the horse and found another company?
So I need to talk a bit about Intel in order for that story to make sense. So when we got acquired by Intel, we joined a mega team, right? We were 40 and we joined another 80. We were 120 people. And, I was very unhappy with the role that they gave me, because that's typically what happens is you come into an existing company, you're going to do this. And then I'm like, ugh, I was middle management. I'm like, I'm bigger than this. I can bring more to the table than this and all that. And I remember telling this to the general manager, the VP general manager, and telling him I was really unhappy about it. And I said, the only next move I see for myself in this company is your job. Right? That's what I think I can do is I can be the GM. I can be the VP of this thing. Eventually I became that, right? They all got fired in California. They gave me the job of GM. And at that point I was essentially running a very well-funded startup, right? It was multi-million-dollar a year budget, and I was running the thing. And what I knew is that, my next thing would be, I wanted to be the CEO of a venture-backed business, because I had been in venture-backed businesses before, but never as the CEO. And that was what I wanted to do. And so one day Intel sold our group to a private equity firm. They shut down offices around the world. I get a call from the EVP, and he's like, Ian, sorry to break the news. Montreal's shutting down. You guys are all out of a job in 3 months. So that was my cue, right? That was okay, now's the time. It's time to build something on my own as the CEO of a venture-backed business. And I knew, I didn't know what that business would be, but I knew three things. The first thing I knew is that I wanted the timing to be right? The radar thing was the wrong timing. And timing is so important when you're building a venture-backed business. And, we have a tendency to see the future, but we need to be not too far ahead. So timing was really important to me. The second piece was, radar, there was no payment, there was no paying user. Password Box was a freemium business, which means that 95% of the users aren't paying, and you got 5% if you're lucky that are paying the premium. So to make that profitable is really, really, really difficult, because you have to have such a massive pool. So I was like, my next thing is there's going to be someone paying us right from the get-go. And the third point, which was most important, so I have two sons, one's 10 and one's 7. And what I wanted was something that could have a positive impact on the world, right? I didn't know, one can argue that picture sharing brings emotional connection and stuff like that, but I wanted something tangible that would have a real impact. So I knew those three things, but I didn't know what the business would be. And one thing that I know about myself is that I'm not usually the original idea guy, right? So Radar was John's idea. Founder Fuel, sure, I launched it, but it was Real Ventures' idea, and specifically more John Stokes. I tend to latch on to great ideas and just execute like crazy. So Dan Robichaud, who was managing partner of Diagram Ventures, who still is actually, he came up to me and he said, we want to do something, a venture in the insurance world, and I think you're the guy to be the CEO. So my original instinct was like, or reaction was like, insurance, this is lame, right? I don't want to do insurance. My father was in insurance, blah, blah, blah. But I started doing some digging, and essentially what came up was, I'm like, this is the right timing, right? If we're selling an insurance product, people are going to buy it, and we're protecting the financial security of people. That has a real material impact on people. And, there's a lot of negative in the insurance world. But the insurance world actually delivers great products. It's just that they do it in a bad way. If I can influence that on top of it, then I'm scratching the 3 itches of what I want to do. And so I started doing more and more research, and eventually I told him, like, I want to do this, right? This is the right thing to do. And so that was like October 2017. And then I started to put the founding team together. I recruited Jean Colahould, who was head of growth at Pastorbox. So we'd known each other for about 4 years at that time. And Sébastien Malherbe, who was who I had made head of product for Truckee. And so I'd known him for about 5 years as well. So the 3 of us sort of jumped into this together, knowing each other really, really well, knowing exactly what drives us, how we work. So that's a big advantage, and having the experience of the exit and all that. And then we recruited Arash Chupani, who is a Montrealer as well, but had been in New York for the last 8 years. So I didn't know him. A lot of people in the community knew him from 8 years back, but I was in California back then. Everyone said amazing things about him, and he had been part of 3 different businesses in New York as CTO, and he scaled, in some cases from 20 people to like 60, 70 people, and it just clicked. It really, really clicked. So in January of 2018, the 4 of us were together, and we started working on BreatheLife.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great founding story. And the vision of the company, right, as you have on your website, is to bring financial security to millions by transforming personal insurance.
Yeah.
Right. I want to talk about the how a little bit.
Yeah.
I'd love to understand a bit the business model and how it's changed over time as well.
Yeah. Well, the original intent, so that's a great description of what we do, by the way. The original intent was to build a brand, build the personal insurance brand of the future, right? And we were going to sell under our own brand. So there's BreatheLife.com, and we would drive traffic to BreatheLife.com, and you would buy an insurance product on our platform.
So direct to consumer.
Direct to consumer. And that's what we started doing. And there's a few of them out there now, Ladder Life, Fabric, there was Quilt. There's a few of them doing that. But really quickly, as we were talking to different potential partners, because we needed an insurance partner to do this, right? Like, we can't have our own insurance product. That's too complicated, at least in the beginning. And as we were talking to insurance carriers, some of them were saying, well, we kind of like you guys, and we like what you're trying to do, and we may want to partner with you guys, but in order to sell our product, we want it to be white label, and it's going to be on our website. And at first, me and the founding team, being B2C guys, were all like, no way, this is not what we're going to do. Like, we don't want to do B2B. We don't know that world, blah, blah, blah. And eventually we sort of convinced ourselves that it was a good idea to do it with one, and that was National Bank. And the reason we wanted to do it is because there are so many hoops that things that need to happen in order for BreatheLife as a brand to be able to sell an insurance company, to sell an insurance product, like having its own license, like having a massive marketing budget, all kinds of different things that we didn't have yet. So we said, let's do it once with National Bank. We're going to learn from that experience. And then when we're ready to do it on our own brand, we'll have, 6, maybe a year worth of knowledge, and we'll go do it. So we all figured that's a good idea. That's a good plan. And we start executing on that. So February 2018, we launched the MVP with National Bank, and shit, it really works. And we keep on building it, and we're like, man, and in parallel, we're getting ready for our own brand, and it's just working and working. And we're like, man, and they're paying us a substantial amount of money for this. And it's really a fruitful relationship. So we said, how about we go talk to a few other carriers and see what their reaction is? And all the carriers were welcoming us, and they all had this problem of trying to figure out digital. And, they have what they call IT teams, right? I said I laugh at it because like our developers are like, IT teams, what's that? But they had these IT teams who all think they can do it, but they've been dabbling in doing it. They have no success. It's not working. And then they see us, super nimble, developers that can push code to prod 2-3 times a week. We can do it much faster, cheaper, less risk, all that type of stuff. And they're resonating really well. So, it's crazy because I was sending an investor update for Q1 of 2019. And I looked at my investor update for Q4 of 2018. And that's when we communicated to our investors that we were dropping the direct to consumer thing and we were going to focus on the B2B thing. In our minds, it feels like we've been doing this for 2 years, but we literally just announced it to our teams internally and our investors Q4 of 2018. And so now we're 100% focused. It's a B2B platform. It's a B2B SaaS platform that enables carriers and distributors to sell insurance online under their own brand in an omni-channel experience. And it's sort of like, we're trying to become like the Shopify of insurance carriers, right? So of insurance distribution. And, I'm sure this audience understands what that means. It means that, if the carrier wants to sell online, they are guaranteed the best experience because we have multiple partners and we have so much traffic coming through our system that we're able to A/B test and build, measure, learn very, very quickly and get the best results for our partners who are, the insurance carriers and distributors.
Yeah. And hats off to like doing the pivot, which I imagine, like you said, like I'm sure you and your co-founding team were like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, we don't know B2B and like, but it, obviously you looked at the data and data showed you. Did you have any moments of doubt saying, hey, is this really going to work? I imagine you did, but how quickly did you realize when you started that, okay, no shit, we're moving in this direction full on?
Well, the truth is, for the longest time, we were doing both, right? So we're doing the B2B thing, we were selling it, and our homepage was sort of BreatheLife will sell you insurance. We weren't reflecting on the homepage what we were really doing. And, I kicked myself after this, but for the long time, we thought we were going to do both. And then we met an investor because we started fundraising. And the investor is like, well, you got to choose one or the other. You can't do both. It's two businesses. And I walked out of that meeting going, fuck, you're stupid. You're so stupid. I'm like, how many times, like through Founder Fuel or through other things, have I told that to entrepreneurs? You can't do both. You got to focus. And here I am thinking I can do both. I was really upset at myself. Yeah. So that's when we said, whoa, what are we doing? And then we, like you said, we looked at the data and we all went, we're going into B2B. But, we were talking about Audrey Larocque before, right? And I was talking to him about this. And he's only done B2B, right? And he was like, the great thing about B2B is that decisions are rational, right? If you convince a carrier to work with you, it's a rational decision. It's not emotional. Whereas B2C is all emotion, right? Like consumers try something, they try for a minute, it doesn't work, they're gone, right? And so that's been real interesting for me because we're signing, our deals are like 3-year deals with optional 2-year renewals. That's a long time to be, making, call it, $500,000 a year per client. It's great business. It's amazing, right? Yeah. Yeah. So it's been really, really interesting to do B2B. So we are so happy we did that pivot.
Yeah. I want to poke you on the data aspect, and I just be respectful of time because I feel there's a lot. You mentioned one thing that piqued my curiosity about being the Shopify of insurance distribution, and I think that can probably unlock many other monetization opportunities, particularly around data. Yeah. But one question I want to get to is more about insurance specifically. You kind of mentioned this perception of insurance, right? So what do you think has been the biggest misunderstanding of it?
Yeah. Well, I think, part of, I realized quickly in looking for our co-founder CTO that, we really needed to be very, very, good at communicating our mission, right? Because I say insurance, you say automatically, right? But when you dig deeper and you understand what the value of the insurance product that we're selling, people go, oh, okay, now I get it. So small story. Jean-Nicolas, who's a co-founder and head of data, when he was 6 or 7 years old, his father passed away. But his parents had great insurance. So that meant that Jean-Nicolas stayed in the same house. His mother didn't go back to work. He went to private school in grade school, high school. He had he had everything that he needed, even though overnight there was no revenue in the house, right? His mother didn't work. That's the power of the product that we're distributing and that's a big challenge of communicating what these things do, is that if the unexpected happens and you're leaving behind children and debt and all that stuff, you need to have that mechanism to protect them. So when we talk about what we do from a mission perspective, people get really, really excited. When we talk about it as a utility, people don't get excited. And the example I always give, and you'll know this great because you were at Google, right? You can talk about Google and say that it's a search engine, like boring. But if you talk about Google as the platform that organizes the world information, you're like, oh, I want to work there, right? I want to be part of that. Yeah. Same sort of thing, right? So we are the impact of our product is massive, and that's how we get around sort of communicating that to people. And that's how, we're very, very public about that. We're very public about our values and who we want around the table working with us. And it's all aligned towards like doing good and making sure that we're having a positive impact. Yeah, it's a credible story. I didn't know that story with Arash. It's Jean-Nicolas, one that I think that just resonates with your team, with customers. Yeah. So what's next for BreatheLife? How big do you see the opportunity? So I could talk a bit about the data piece, right? So like we're collecting massive amounts of data, right? And that data will unlock all kinds of crazy things, because traditionally insurance is sold offline, right? So it's a broker who comes into the kitchen table with a paper form and enters all kinds of stuff on that paper form. And then that sort of goes into a system between the insurance carrier and sometimes the reinsurer, but that's it, right? But we're digitizing all that and tracking all of that. So we're effectively becoming the first cross-carrier, cross-product platform, cross-geography platform that knows where the customer is coming from, right? From source all the way to purchase of the product, everything in between. And hopefully later on in the second part, which is like claims management and all that type of stuff, that doesn't exist, right? So being in the middle of all of that, the hub of all of that, will unlock massive, massive opportunities. And that's what makes this a potential gigantic business. Yeah. Very cool. Ian, I know you have to run off to a meeting, so I don't want to keep you more. Last question is, where can people find out about what you guys are doing and want to connect with you? So the website is breathelife.com. We were lucky enough to get the .com. I'm not active on Twitter. I've given up on Twitter, but I'm very, very active on LinkedIn. We're publishing a lot of content on LinkedIn and on Medium. So those are the places where you can hear about the company, sort of my position on how to reinvent this industry, but also learn about the engineering team. They have their own blog and they're producing content as well. And so we have a big focus on creating content about who we are, what we do, and how we do it. So LinkedIn, Medium, and breathelife.com are the three places to find out. Cool. Thanks so much, Ian. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Point of No Return podcast. Never miss an episode by clicking on the subscribe button on iTunes or Google Play.